Our speakers are Adam Kay, who's held the position of CEO of Cotton Australia since way back in 2007, and Robert Ryan, who has 40 years of experience in the wool industry and is currently Managing Director and Chairman of Schute Badgery, Lumby. China is Australia's biggest market for natural fibres, and not only was it hit by COVID-19 early on, the pandemic has created a few trade tensions you may see between our two countries. So what's the impact of that on our wool and cotton markets, and what's the longer-term outlook more generally? We'll kick off first with Adam. Adam, how's the cotton season shaping up?
The season's shaping up much better than last year. We're coming off the back of the smallest crop in 40 years. So, last season we only produced 0.13 of a million tonnes. So, it was something like 600,000 bales, and this season we're already forecasting 2.1 million bales or 500,000 tonnes. So it's heading in the right direction. Although we would love to see 1 million tonnes of cotton fibre produced here. At the moment that 500,000 tonnes is only 2% of the global production. If we have a look at maybe start off just having a look at the global picture and then come back down to the season in Australia and the impacts in the market. But when we look at cotton, it's grown in over 70 countries around the world. We've got over 100 million producers. So our 1,500 producers in Australia is not a lot compared to how many there are around the world. But cotton is still the world's #1 natural fibre. It's got about 27% of the world fibre market. And, production this year is estimated to be around 25 million tonnes. And the biggest producers of cotton are going to be India at about 6.2 million, China 6 million, USA 3.7, Brazil 2.5, Pakistan 1.2. So they're the big producers of cotton globally. The International Cotton Advisory Committee is suggesting that consumption is going to stay about the same as the production, so around the 24.5 million tonnes, and the biggest consumers of cotton are China at 7.8 million tonnes, India at 5.1, Pakistan at 2.2. So a lot of those countries will grow a lot of cotton, consume a lot of their own, and then want a bit more. Of the 9 million tonnes exported, the biggest importer is China, with that takes about 2 million tonnes. Vietnam takes about 1.5 million tonnes, and Bangladesh about 1.4 million tonnes. But apart from COVID, one of the biggest things impacting cotton at the moment is the stocks to use ratio, the world stocks to use ratio, which is sitting around 1, and that means in warehouses around the world there's about 1 year's consumption sitting there, and that high stock level really has an impact on prices as well as the impacts of COVID-19. So I just went through what the Australian outlook is. The good thing is Australia sells every bale it produces every year, and that's a real strength of our industry. So there's no stock sitting in warehouses that can't find a home. And because we have counter-season production, counter to the Northern Hemisphere, we've got this high quality that always pulls our cotton through the market. And then we've got the short shipping times into those Asian markets. You can be up there in 10 to 14 days. That's a real advantage for the Australian industry. The season that we're looking at, we've seen a good turnaround in some areas. From Dubbo south, we've seen Burrendong Dam go from 1% in January up to about 50%, and good increases in Wrangler and Burrinjuck and Blowering. But in the north of New South Wales, we're still light on as far as the dams go. In the Namoi, Guida, McIntyre, the headwater storages, we just haven't had the inflows there. So whilst the winter crop is looking great, I was up in Narrabri this week and out through Reewar and that magnificent looking wheat crops out through all that country. We haven't got a lot in storage, not a lot in the bank for the cotton crop, and so that's why the national crop is only sitting at that 2.1 million bales, but there's still time for this La Nina to kick in. We've got to be glass half full, and the forecast is there for the La Nina, and if that can kick in, people will plant cotton. Depending on their area, to early mid-November, or even if you're in northern parts of the industry up in Emerald in central Queensland, you'll plant up to Christmas time. As far as the market goes for cotton, as I mentioned, every bale of Australian cotton is exported. And our markets are China. As Karen mentioned, China's just so important for Australian natural fibres. 70% of the crop goes to China. The other major countries that take our cotton, Vietnam takes about 9%, Indonesia around 8%, Bangladesh 5%, and then other countries vary year to year, Turkey, Pakistan, Thailand, but China really loves our high quality cottons. They've really got a taste for it. And if China reduced the amount it took, we would be able to sell Australian cotton into those other markets, but it would be probably at a reduced price. Our Australian cotton shippers are very good at finding a home for our crop, but if China wasn't in the market, it might be at a reduced price. As far as the impacts of COVID-19, the coronavirus, we've seen destruction of demand globally as stores have closed and demand for clothing and textiles has reduced. That's really had an impact, and we've seen our cotton shippers having to deal with their clients coming back wanting to delay shipment, some of them wanting to cancel shipments, and globally we've seen the price of cotton fall by about 20%. So before the pandemic, cotton was trading up around $620 a bale, some really quite high levels, and now it's back around 500. Still okay, still profitable for high yielding growers, but not as good. And the Australian industry, the Australian Cotton Industry Forum that brings together all the sectors of our industry, the ginners, the classes, the growers, the input suppliers, the researchers, has been updating its risk register, for the last 6 months, and really it's that destruction of demand that is the biggest risk for the industry from COVID-19, and how that works its way through the supply chain. But when we look at globally, cotton's competition is still man-made fibre. It's your polyester, and we have, I think we're seeing an increased awareness of the advantages of natural fibres like cotton and wool over the man-made fibres. The fact that our product is biodegradable, the fact that we're doing a lot of work around recycling and reusing, and we're not having the impacts of microplastics coming off our clothing that won't break down and that are turning up in all sorts of parts of the food chain in the ocean. So really, Australia's cotton industry is an incredibly efficient industry and is the global gold standard. We've been able to reduce our water use, and our water use efficiency is up by 48%. We've had a reduction in pesticide use by 93%. We've got the highest yields in the world of cotton and the most water use efficient industry. So, like the wool industry, we've got a natural fibre industry in Australia in cotton that we should be really, really proud of. And we're seeing more and more brands, both Australian and international brands, moving to 100% Australian cotton, demanding Australian cotton, because more and more their consumers are asking, how was it grown? To what standards was it grown, and where did it come from? And our best practices program has put us in really good stead. It links through to the Global Better Cotton Initiative, and it's a really positive story. And like all of agriculture, we've got to keep telling our story. And at the moment, we're working on our draft sustainability targets. We're doing a lot of consultation. We've got 10-year targets on sustainability and a whole lot of aspects of water use and carbon and a whole lot of aspects. And we're out talking to external stakeholders, the WWF, Wentworth Group, others, to really set those targets of continual improvement for the next 10 years. And, as an industry, we're not afraid of bold targets. I can remember when we set the target to reduce pesticide use by 50% a couple of decades ago, and a lot of people thought, oh, you're crazy, you'll never do it. But a strong target like that focused everyone, focused our researchers, focused our growers, and look at it, we've been able to reduce pesticide use by over 90%. And excitingly, we've got the industry potentially expanding up into northern Australia, and we've got the Ord, having a rebirth. We've got the Kimberley Ag Investments and a number of growers that have moved up into the Ord. An exciting time up there. The Northern Territory around Katherine and the Douglas Daly, the trial crops that have been grown there are looking fantastic, and up in the Gulf in Queensland. So, really a new frontier starting to open up on the back of quality research and good science, and really looking forward to an exciting time for the Australian cotton industry. So I'm very happy to take questions when it's appropriate, and I'll hand back to you, Karen.
Fantastic, thanks, Adam. It sounds like fingers and toes are crossed at the moment as far as water goes, but positive news on the competition with synthetics anyway. Now, don't forget to keep those questions coming. You can type them into the Q&A function at any time. It's one of the icons near the bottom of your screen. We'll head over to Robert now, and it's been a bit of a wild ride for wool over the past couple of years. How is it looking from your perspective?
I've lost you.
Robert, are you there?
Yep, I'm here. Look at
Beautiful.
that. We're going. Well, I was very impressed with Adam's presentation, because I think it's great to be here on a panel with someone who actually is also a natural fibre, and particularly involved in Australian production of natural fibre and all of the good things that come with natural fibres that we know about being sustainable and environmentally friendly and biodegradable. Very similar to points that I wanted to make that Adam has raised. I think I'd just talk about a few things and then look forward to a lot of questions. Obviously, the market at the moment is on the top of everybody's mind, and the market has come off substantially in the last 6 months, and that's principally driven by the virus and concerns about, in a lot of countries, people would rather be obviously eating something than wearing something, and so they're going to go out and buy food rather than they're going to go and buy a new suit or a new woolen product. From a COVID point of view, that has obviously affected the retail, and that's affected demand, and put concerns about how factories and how plants work, particularly in China. And as with cotton, the biggest consumer of wool, and you must remember Australia is the biggest producer of apparel wool. It doesn't have the biggest number of sheep in the world. Other countries do, including China and Russia. But having said that, they eat most of them in those countries. We're a little bit more, we've got a more durable and more multi-purpose animal, so we can eat the lambs and the mutton, and we can also produce some pretty good wool. To give you a little bit of a picture, the production has come down over the last few. In 1819, we were looking to produce 300 million kilograms. We came back in 1920 to 283, and we're estimating this year will be about 280 million kilograms of wool, and that's about 1.5, 1.6 million bales of wool. And sure, that's a long way from where it used to be in the days when we had subsidies and assistance, but we have very much a free market now, and we have a dominance, as I said before, from China. We have great support historically from India and Italy, the Czech Republic, and many other countries. But the difference, I suppose, I know Adam talked about the quality of the cotton that Australia produced, which I agree totally. We produce the best wool in the world, and that's just a fact. There is a lot of other wool produced from New Zealand, South Africa, and Europe, particularly for the interior textile market, and that wool is nowhere of the quality and the standard that we have with particularly our merino wool and our next to skin capacity that everybody's come to like. So the demand is softened. However, in the last 2 weeks, it's substantially picked up, and that's probably two things. There has been a little bit of a reaction to, well, maybe the COVID's going to come along and change, and maybe we're going to have a new outlook, and people are starting to say, well, let's get a bit more stock in hand. And the other thing that probably occurred is that the market came off pretty quickly, and it probably came off a bit too far. And if you look at the indicator, we're about 1080 or something like that today. The ABARE prediction for the year is about 1040. So we probably went down nearly to 900 odd, and then we bounced back up, and we might get a little bit higher. But everybody's just sort of hoping that the market will stabilise, and then create an opportunity for all sectors of the market to survive. Our producers have had a particularly hard last 12 months and the 2 years before that because of the drought and lack of food and water, and of course in some areas some fires that destroyed their not only their properties but all the infrastructure that is needed to look after livestock. So I think it is going to be going forward. We'll see the market hopefully stabilise and hopefully come back to a higher level than it probably right is at the moment. We're going to need some changes. We need some bold confidence coming from the retail sector, and that's going to come when, for example, if we have a vaccine and if we have some opportunities for people to say, well, if we can do this and we can fix that, we can get rid of the threat of having this bad thing occur, which is the case on everybody's mind. It's very interesting though. The season that we've got at the moment is just a complete turnaround. People are doing very well with their livestock, and particularly their pastures. There's going to be a big crop produced of grains this year, and therefore there's a lot of fodder. A lot of mixed farmers are in the business of having diverse incomes from not only cropping but also from livestock. So they're up and running. They've got food, they've got water, and they've got a good season looking ahead. So that's a very positive for production. So I think production will come back to the level that I mentioned before. I do think that we've got to not take our eye off the game. We've got to make sure that we are producing the best wool and preparing it the best way, and making sure that we get it and market it and sell it in the best possible manner. Now, there's a lot of work that's been done in the last little while that to do with keeping wool and livestock industries going, and that's making sure that we were recognised as an essential service, so that the animal welfare issues could be dealt with by shearers and by property owners and graziers in particular, and I think making sure that we had the pathways clear for not only harvesting the wool but also bringing it into the store for testing and preparation for sale, subsequent sale, and therefore moving on to shipment and export. And all of those pathways, we've had great assistance from within the industry, setting guidelines and measures to make sure that we conducted ourselves in an appropriate manner, but also making sure that the pathway for export was clear, so that there was no chance of creating an issue where we might be able to say we're going to sell something, but we actually couldn't deliver it. So the enormous amount of work has gone on in the background by the industry to make sure that we had all of those steps clear, and congratulations to them, because the industry as such has done a great job. So we're moving forward. We're looking very positive at the movement in the market at the moment. And, as usual, the wool industry gets on and does a lot of things. There's a lot of people who say, oh, it's very old-fashioned. Here am I sitting here. I notice the only one with a tie on today, and a lovely woolen suit straight out of the hills of New England. But I think, we've really, really consistently pulled together in this very, very difficult time. So, Karen, thank you. I'd love to take some questions.
Not a problem. Now, Robert, I was going to leave this as my, funky last question, but given that you brought it up, I saw some media a while ago about the death of the suit, because people are working from home, those that are going into the office. The wool industry is in big trouble because nobody's going to be wearing suits anymore. What do you think?
Well, I've got quite a few in the cupboard, and they're not bad. Some of them are a little bit tighter than they used to be, and I have to work on that a bit. But look, it is an issue, but I have a a very funky young son-in-law who wears a suit. He's lost the tie, which is a bit of an issue for me, but he does prefer wool now that I've got it into his Irish mind, and he wears it pretty much every day. But look, I think you're right. It's one of those challenges. I mean, if we wanted to, we could say that the ladies' side of the job has let us down enormously because the biggest fall in production is for women's suiting, but I won't bring that up. But the next to skin products, such as the 18 microns and finer, the finer products, they're coming to the fore all the time. And you can buy those in Aldi pretty much regularly, and they're at the right price. So there's some good stuff out there. It's just changed the appearance. But I've just got to get a bit more life out of these suits, Karen.
Fair enough. And obviously wool's going a lot more into active wear and things like that, which apparently we're all wearing now. So there's probably some good news there. So Adam, there's a question. We click over to you now, and China's been mentioned. You mentioned that it was one of our major markets, and I'll talk to both of you about this. Is the cotton industry worried about how many people are talking about Chinese-Australian relations and about China's aggressiveness? Is that worrying you at all?
I think it's worrying a lot of Australian industries, and certainly it forces you to make those contingency plans and look at the other homes you could find for your crop. But I think the good thing is that we know that China does love our high quality Australian cotton, and it can't really get it from other markets. But I think we've just got to. We've been trying to keep a small target strategy and not sort of say too much about it because, there's just no point going out in the media and even I think there's no point for our politicians making a lot of noise. I think our trade minister's been, saying the right thing and being very diplomatic, and I think we need to do that because we don't want to aggravate people on this trade front.
Fair enough. So there are people saying that we should be building processing in Australia. So I guess, Adam, if we stick with you for a minute, do you think that given our exposure in China, can we bring it back to Australia or to cheaper places like Indonesia? Is that something that you think's on the cards?
I think it is. We often think about, the processing as being, it's about the cost of labour. The modern spinning mill these days is really computer controlled and hasn't got the big labour costs. And I know, some organisations that have run the due diligence on this, and it's not the labour cost, it's the cost of energy in this country, and they can go and buy the energy at a third the price in Mumbai. And so we've got to get the energy policy right in Australia, and that's going to enable, processing to come back onshore. I think also we've got a number of organisations that are really embracing renewables, and if we can get that right, that can help drive a rebirth of the processing sector in this country. So it's not going to happen quickly, but like others, COVID-19 has shown us that we can't just keep relying on people offshore to process our products, and we've got to get back into the game.
Right. Robert, what about you in terms of processing wool in Australia? Is that remotely realistic?
Well, we used to do it here all the time, but our labour costs were too high, and so a lot of it and the machinery went many years ago went off to China, and that's they've got some looming issues there because they've got some wage issues and all of those demands that come with when you employ a lot of people. I think from our point of view, I agree with what Adam said. I mean, we need to be very careful because, look, without China, Australia, from my point of view, would be in a very difficult position because they do take our wool. They've been here through the thick and thin of all of the issues of drought, through all of the styles of wool, and we've had some pretty poor wool. We've sold wool that's yielded 50%, so it means if you're selling a bale of wool, call it 200 kilos, 100 kilos of its dirt. And they've been buying it consistently. We're not passing it in, we've been selling it, and they've kept their mills going. So they are very important to us. And their dominance as well. It's always a worry when someone dominates some situation, but at the end of the day, you have to manage that. You have to live with it, and we've historically and will, as soon as each of these other countries get their house in order, we'll have the great support back from India, who is a major consumer of Australian wool, and they have various needs to have employment functioning in their country. So India is right up there. Italy, of course, who works on the top end of the product. Not all of it. They take all sorts of wool, but their top end product into high fashion suits is renowned. So they are there. They're edging back in, and along with the Czech Republic, who have another approach to the wool processing. But it's very, very important. But China is. I don't think we need to report bad things, because that just doesn't help anybody, and everybody likes a story. But at the end of the day, the good story is they're there buying our wool, and that's important.
How much competition is there between mills in China? Do they compete against each other?
Oh yes, I mean, there's mills represented in Australia, and then they have their own buyers. They employ their own people, and there are other mills that use agents, and they buy from those agents, or they're employing that agent sometimes individually, and sometimes they're employing them in a sole manner. But also then they might have multiple agents buying. It depends on what type of wool they want to buy and how they want to go about it. But yes, there is substantial competition. There's about 3,000 processors of wool in China. The big end of town are seriously multi-million dollar people, really are. I mean, you've also got to remember the population of China. They talk about 1.4, it's probably 1. Might even be 1.6 billion people. And of that number of people in China, they've got something in the order of about 500 million people that are seriously financially okay. They're like millionaires. And we've got a population of 25 heading for 26, and we're not all millionaires. Probably we'd like to be, but there is a substantial number of people in China, because the wool we send there, 50% of the wool we send there stays in China. So people are wearing it, and the other 50% is either turned from greasy to top to yarn to fabric, or sent out along the way to other countries. And a lot of that trade's still going on as we speak through the countries that a lot of people in the media don't want to recognise, or don't want to talk about. But there's lots of good things happening. It's again, like Adam said, there's some things that are talked about and some things aren't. But yeah, look, we find the competition good. Sometimes we'd like a little bit more, but we're softly at the moment.
Yeah. Now, COVID-19 is the other big topic of discussion, it seems, at the moment. Robert, we'll start with you. Media have been talking about a shortage of shearers and related workers because they can't get in from New Zealand. Is that a myth or a reality? How are we going for labour supply in the wool industry?
Yeah, look, a lot of work's been done between the Shearing Contractors Association and also Wool Producers Australia to make sure that we get into this time now. We've got September, November, which is the peak shearing time. We seem to be having enough. The people who want to come, or we need to come from New Zealand, which historically been a big shearing community and still is, they have a lot more sheep per head than Australians do, but they don't have the numbers. But having said that, they make a profession out of it, and it's a bit like they come to Australia, make some money, go back and live for the rest of the year. There's work being done in discussions with government between those two bodies, and there are methods and opportunities for lodging applications to come as a group. Still have to go through the 14-day isolation and quarantine. That's fine, but they can be assisted and fast-tracked in that respect. And I think going forward, that's going to become easier and easier. But luckily enough, while the sheep are probably starting to cut a fair bit more now because of the better season, we're not actually seeing I can't get shearers today sort of thing. That's not occurring. I think it might be a little bit different in other industries. Like the mangoes picking season's about to start in the top end. So they're probably needing a lot more people from Victoria who can't get up there at the moment because they can't get across the border. But there'll be a lot of people who will probably be required to do a lot of those mass short-term picking arrangements, be it cherries or be it mangoes or whatever else. So I think at the moment we're okay. Work's been done by the appropriate industry bodies and cleared the path and got themselves ready.
Adam, what about the cotton industry? You're heading into planting, just generally with particularly internal border closures, I guess more for you. How are things going?
Yeah, look, I think we've just got to look to the alternate sources, and I know a lot of growers working on recruiting the uni students. You know, there's a fair push in a lot of the unis, and I like to get people out. That's just for, you know, that's going to be for wheat harvest, and then the, you know, the cotton irrigating, and then hopefully through to cotton picking. So we're looking at the alternative sources of labour. You know, we've always loved our you know, European backpackers that are off a farm over there and know how to operate a tractor, and that, you know, the Scots and the Irish and whatever, you know, they've been great, but, you know, they're going to be in shorter supply this year, and you know, we're going to have to look a little bit closer to home. You know, we're also working on you know, putting out there our cotton gap year, because, you know, there's a lot of kids that are going to finish year 12 that may have gone off to Europe or somewhere for a gap year, and having a gap year on farm. You know, we've run it before the drought, and it was very popular, and it shows a lot of kids that there's a wonderful career to be had in Australian agriculture. And you know, we've had kids from the city come and do that, you know, gap year, that cotton gap, and now they're at uni and coming back working on farm in their holidays and want a career in the industry. So, you know, that's maybe a longer term play, but it's still important.
No, that's good news. So what about the opposite though? People talk about people getting staff here. What about getting product overseas? I don't know whether either of you have a view on whether that has shifted with the production.
We've got a major issue at the moment with the port in Sydney, and you know, and it goes slowly with the stevedores, and you know, we're working through that, and I wouldn't be surprised to see something lodged with the Fair Work Commission very shortly around that, because you know, some of the companies are you know, charging a sort of a fee of up to sort of $500 and $600 a container for the delays, and you know, that's $5 a bale per bale of cotton that that the shippers can't put on to, you know, they can't charge that anywhere. That's just lost margin for them. So, you know, that's one that's you know, a real issue for us at the moment. It's not really COVID related. It's you know, it's just an industrial relations thing, but it's a live issue at the moment.
Robert, for wool?
Well, Karen, from our point of view, I mean, we've been going okay. I mean, we haven't seen the effect of the Sydney port, but a lot of wool, you know, principally goes out of either Fremantle or Melbourne or Sydney, and with the cost of bringing ships into port, they tend to move them a bit. So, you know, they probably truck all the wool from Brisbane to Sydney, or even to Melbourne for that matter, to fill the container and to send it overseas. But we haven't experienced any sign of any delay as a result of the virus.
All right, terrific. Now we've got a question here from Jess Lehman to Adam. When do you expect cotton to move from $500? Do you think it could go lower than that with low demand for textiles now?
Look, it's a good question, and it's just how this plays out down the supply chain, because, you know, in the global financial crisis, when we saw the price come off, we saw once money came back into the market, we saw a big sort of splash of buying and an increase in demand, and you know, hopefully we can see that after this COVID crisis. But you know, it's a little bit like the financial markets. They're staying up there, but you know, some of the fundamentals aren't that good. So you know, I don't want to see it go lower, but you know, they just could. But yeah, I'm not that good a Nostradamus on this sort of stuff.
All right, and a question that's a bit related from Gary Gouch. Cotton's probably well placed to compete for water based on price relative to other commodities at present. How do you see the availability and price of water in the next decade or so, and the effect on cotton?
Look, it's a good question, because the you know, water is the limiting factor for our industry. You know, our growers normally have got plenty of land, and the limiting factor is water. And so all their financial budgeting is not on a per hectare basis; it's on a per megalitre basis. They're looking for the best return per megalitre, and that's why, you know, it's unfortunate some people say, "Oh, cotton's a thirsty crop." They say that because when you go to northern New South Wales, 80% of the irrigation water is used for cotton, because it's the most profitable crop on a per megalitre basis, and so people choose to grow it. It doesn't use any more than the soybeans or corn, but it's just people choose to grow it. You know, if the price of corn was double, everyone would be growing corn, and people would be saying, "Oh, that corn's a thirsty crop," but it's not. You know, cotton is just middle of the road as far as its water use goes in summer crops. You know, things like lucerne for hay uses a lot more than cotton, but there's just not huge areas grown of it. So yeah, but when you're moving back to Gary's question, there was some good data came out from New South Wales Water this week that just showed, coming up to the year 2000, water availability in the Northern Basin and Southern Basin, and then from the last 20 years, and it's 30% down in the last 20 years. So is that just part of the cycle? Is it climate change? We've got to see how that plays out. But there is no doubt that as an industry we are working to maximise the amount of crop per drop, and it's a major focus of all our R&D effort and of our growers to just keep driving that water use efficiency, because the water is our number one limiting factor.
Okay, Robert, a question to you from David Boyd. One of the marked differences between cotton and wool selling in Australia is the dominance of forward selling of cotton and crop selling of wool. Can you see wool continuing to rely on that, or moving toward more forward selling?
David would bring that up. He loves that because he used to produce a bit of wool and cotton, by the way. But look, yeah, I mean, there's always the critic of the system's not right, and we do a lot of instant selling. I suppose the thing about wool is, and not unlike cotton, you can store it, and some people like to store it and manage their risk by doing that. They don't like the market, they'll hold it for a while. But basically, there's also an opportunity to sell forward, and we, particularly our company, publicise the forward market every week. And if people want to lock themselves in, it's not a deliverable market; it's a paper market, and you can do that. Having said that, most people have trouble in seasons like we've just had is actually producing the wool to the spec that they actually have signed up to. So they've actually incurred a bit of a risk. They've signed up to this, and then they've got wool, for example, that doesn't have this tensile strength of the fibre that they originally expected it would, or it doesn't have the yield or the style or whatever the category might be. So they can incur a bit of a risk. The long-term players, the bigger end of town, might be able to do a bit of that, but people are generally not happy with the price. When the price was as high as well over the 2000 indicator, people were saying, "Oh, it's still going to go up. I might not do anything about that." But unfortunately, the forward futures market is not like it used to be because of the volume, and probably also because of the narrowness of the processes out the other end. There's not the number there that used to be there like we might have had in the past. So I hope that answers the question. Yeah.
Do you think that covers? Ted Harnett has asked a question that cotton farmers extensively use financial risk management products. Wool growers don't seem to. And what do you think the reason is? Is that a similar sort of an answer?
Probably is. And Ted, being an old wool breaker from way back, should know the answers, so he doesn't have to ask them. But the question, the reality is that once you got the wool off, you can store it. And a lot of people, like they're doing at the moment, they're not happy with the price. They're going to store the wool. That's not particularly good for us, because I'm actually a wool selling broker, not a wool holding broker. And they tend to manage their risk, because they you can't hold a sheep when it's fat. It's fat. Or you're going to sell that lamb before it cuts its teeth. That's what you're going to do. You can hold your wool, you can hold your cotton if you're so inclined. Not necessarily the way to make a lot of money, but yeah, there is. It's a similar answer to the one I gave before, I think.
Fair enough. Now, Adam, in your presentation, you mentioned Northern Australia, and there's a fair bit of interest in how that's going. A few questions that have been sent through from the Land newspaper. How far do you have to cart the crop to get it processed? Is there enough local support for machinery? What sort of volumes are expected in the future? Like, what is the picture for that northern crop?
At the moment, the production in WA and the Northern Territory, and that are being carted back to Dalby and St George, and 3,000 kilometre cartage is something like $200 a bale. It's the whole margin is being chewed up there. But the growers up there are proving that cotton can be grown viably and profitably, and so the next stage in the Ord and the Northern Territory will be the development of a cotton gin. It's a key piece of infrastructure. It's an expensive piece of infrastructure at $20 to $30 million, but that's going to be important. So I think you've got governments looking closely. We've been working closely with the WA Ag Minister, and the Territory's Ag Minister's just changed, but there is support there from government. They have done their due diligence on the industry. They know that there is real potential. The areas up there, at the moment in the Ord, there's enormous amounts of sort of little niche crops and seed crops and rock melons being grown for the Perth market. But if you open up new country and everyone grows those things, it'll destroy those little markets. You need to have something that's in demand globally, and cotton is the one that can do that. And we can get it out of the port of Darwin and into those markets that take our cotton. So it is an exciting time, but the key thing is going to be that piece of infrastructure, the cotton gin, and I know there's a lot of work going on, feasibility studies and that, and hopefully there's going to be some announcements soon.
Okay, so shorter rather than longer time frame to happen.
I think so. I would expect announcements in the next 6 months, I would hope.
Terrific. Okay, Robert, a question to you from Australian Community Media, from Kristen Frost. Is there concern about an overload of wool hitting the market now there's some newfound demand, and will it be able to handle that?
Yeah, good question. And I think the answer is yes, there is some concern because we're holding. Nobody knows the exact figure because no one wants to tell. I can tell you what we're holding, but I'm not going to. But there's this enormous amount of wool being held, and hopefully it'll be fed onto the market in an intelligent way. But people were getting to the point where, certain types, they were just not able to bring themselves to accept that price. I mean, if you think we've got some problems in Australia, you should go to New Zealand, where our average price today for a bale of wool is still somewhere around about the $1,100. We sold wool earlier this week, made $2,000 a bale. Everybody's pretty happy with that. But in New Zealand, their average price is about $100 a bale. So, they're 30 sheep to the bale, let's say, they're not doing all that well. I think we'll have to manage it carefully. Most people, because we have a better season, have got other income streams. So they, as I said before, they'll be selling their lambs, they'll be selling their mutton, their surplus stock, etc., and feed their wool onto the market as we can best advise them. But it is, if we dumped it all there in one go, which it's not going to happen because people will want to see a better market going up, and they won't want to destroy it. But it's something we have to manage.
Yeah. Now, a question that we also got previously sent in ahead of the grower, the 1.5% wool levy coming back to bite growers. Do you think with AWI's levy that Australia needs to be ramping up its wool marketing efforts at the moment to try and get rid of some of that stockpile?
Well, they always need to do that. I mean, basically, they were originally founded as a research and a marketing business, and then sometimes they go off in other tangents. There was a review conducted within the industry not all that long ago, which brought out a lot of things about what we might do and what we can do. But I think we've just got to be very, very, very careful how we spend that money. I mean, those marketing guys, they always want more, and they're able to spend it. And we all remember the little red dress and all of those things. It was great, and it cost billions. But anyway, at the end of the day, it has to be handled carefully. And I think they're doing quite a good job. Sometimes they get off into topics that they want to build a competitive system to what we've already got or whatever. I think that's a bit of a dream. But at the end of the day, if we need to I know as we are now, I think we need to talk the product truly as it is, but also we're not talking it up unnecessarily. We're talking it as it is, and not only wool and cotton, but we actually have a good product, and it is in demand. Sometimes people just don't like the money, but they're getting better understanding at it. If you look at a forward signal, the demand for merino rams as it's going on at the moment in the marketplace is exceptional. I mean, they're having 100% clearance. The average price for merino rams is outstanding, and all the producers, all the stud producers are very happy with the result that they're getting to date. So, I think going forward, we're not too bad.
All right. Now, Adam, your comments about Northern Australia have prompted a couple of follow-up questions. One about if the business case is so strong, why isn't private enterprise building a cotton gin in northern New South Wales? And you mentioned this, but do you foresee cotton being shipped directly from Northern Australia?
And look, I think private enterprise is looking very closely at the gin in a couple of places in Northern Australia. So, I think what they want to make sure they've got is government and local support wherever they put it, and that's the thing. So it's not necessarily always financial support, but it's having the powers that be supporting a new industry coming to the area. As far as exporting cotton from Northern Australia, yes, the Port of Darwin, we would love to see that. The issue is at the moment that taking a box from the Port of Darwin into our, Asian markets is about 3 to 4 times the price of a box from Brisbane. And that's because of the size of the ships and like now, if we can get the volumes and the demand up and that will come down, but that is an issue at the moment. We would like to use that port, but we've got to get the pricing right.
Okay, now we've probably got time just for one more question, and I'm going to declare a personal interest because I work in a livestock industry and I'm intrigued by this. A lot of people who have animal welfare at the heart are saying stop producing wool, particularly because of animal welfare. People who don't like the use of water in cotton keep saying go use synthetic fibres. Both of you have talked about how great natural fibres are, and that's obviously the industry you're in. Do you think that those competing things will win out in favour of natural fibres rather than synthetics, or will things like animal welfare and water use and chemical use push people more towards synthetics?
Well, I've got the animal on my side, so I'll let Adam go second. The fact of the matter is that we've got a world community, particularly in a lot of the countries in Europe that are very I've got to be careful what I say here. They're very focused on green things, and it may be that they are not wanting to have animals harmed in any way. But at the end of the day, you're going to wake up and you say, I'm either going to become a vegetarian or I'm going to eat meat or I'm not. And I'm also going to make sure that I wear clothes. Now, if you want to wrap yourself in a drum of oil, that's fantastic. And if you want to be very proud of the fact that you wear plastic, well, that's also fantastic. It's not quite my cup of tea, and the most of the people in the world, I think, are of the same mind as I am. If you necessarily China is doesn't see it quite the same. They're aware of the markets. If they're selling into Europe and they're selling a product that's next to skin and it's important where it comes from, the credentials of it, then there's an interest in it. But a lot of people there are really about buying a good thing, good product. But so it's an issue that we have to be wary of. We have to be very careful of, and no one wakes up in the morning in Australia and says, I'm going out to harm my animals. That just doesn't happen. There's processes and things that we do that people have changed and are changing, and they're using more modern technologies, let's say, to look after those animals. So it's something that's in our mind, and we're doing and dealing with it as best we can. Maybe that answers it or not, Carol, I don't know.
It just intrigues me because the other side of the coin is climate change, of course, and using more more synthetics. Anyway, Adam, your view.
Well, you just made the point. You know, you've got people trying to convince you that a petrochemical plant over here using oil is somehow better than a plant in the paddock producing a natural fibre. You know, it's just and then the oil product actually has microfibres and issues, doesn't break down. You know, we've got these magnificent natural fibres, Australian cotton and wool, and you know, and that's our job, is to promote them, to get that information out there to people so they can make the right decisions. You know, I think we can't rest on our laurels. We've got to keep doing better, be it with, you know, water and pesticides, but we've also got to you know, tell the story. You know, we've seen, you know, the Murray-Darling Basin Plan. If you believe the sort of mainstream media, this is a disaster and it's just been terrible. The fact is that 20% of the water that was available for agriculture 10 years ago has now been taken back through purchases or on-farm efficiency and given to the environment, and it's a frustration for the, you know, we had a meeting with the environmental defenders of the Commonwealth Environmental Waterholder, who manages that water and is doing all wonderful things for different wetlands and different wildlife species. The Murray-Darling Basin Authority, the frustration for these people, they're doing such a good job. If you take a helicopter view, Australia is doing better than anywhere in the world in trying to look after this Murray-Darling Basin Plan, and yet the media just focus in on, you know, the small issues where it might not be quite right, whereas we're making huge gains. So, you know, we've just got to get we've got to keep telling our story. We've got to keep improving. We can't rest on our laurels at all. We've got to keep driving our water use efficiency and those sorts of things. And I think in time we're seeing that swing back to the natural. We're seeing it with food, and we're going to see it with fibre. And I think that, you know, the future is really exciting.
It's a great positive note to end on. Thank you so much to both of you for a really interesting discussion. That's all we've got time for today in terms of our panel session. So, as I say, thank you to both of you for that. Robert Ryan from Schute, Badgery, Lumby, and Adam Kay from Cotton Australia for giving up their time and sharing their many years of experience in those two industries with us.